Servus my Harley fans, welcome to another episode of Stefan's Garage. Today inside the garage as it's getting winter and it's already dark. So the intro now in the garage. First of all, two disclaimers. If you are a Harley hater, then you can skip the video and jump right into the comment section. Do a lot of comments, that supports the algorithm and the channel, and I might not answer them. So for all Harley enthusiasts, stay tuned. Almost a year ago it started with some magic green bushings, and they were set to stop Harley wobble on those Harleys that are wobbling. Now a lot of test miles or test kilometers later, we got some experience on those parts, and we did quite some research what is affecting the wobble on some Harleys. As I mentioned before, not all touring bikes are not stable, only a very few of them, and that's irrespective of fork mounted or frame mounted fairing or no fairing at all. So stay tuned. I will give you a brief overlook what can cause the wobble on your Harley and how you might be able to stop it. And I want to say I'm just a Harley nerd, so all in the video is based on my perception and my experience, and your bike may have different problems or no problems at all. So first of all, we want to check that the tire sizes are correct, and not only the size 130/60 R19, as well the thread load. Here 61 at the front, and more important here in the back, especially with aftermarket tires, that it's the right thread load mark here, 80H. Sometimes you get 74s at your dealer, and then the whole tire is significantly softer, which might already lead to wobbling. After checking the tire size, we want to make sure that the steering bearing is not too tight and not too soft. For that, please check your service manual. And then next thing is the correct tire pressure. Harley recommends on almost all those touring bikes 36 psi in the front, 40 in the back, and that applies to those pretty low tires as well, those more bobber style tires as well. 36 the recommended tire pressure, which I do not agree on. So the correct tire pressure is very important for the stability of the bike. And here you see we have too little tire pressure. So 36 would be the Harley recommended, and as I am riding aftermarket Metzeler tires, which are known to be a little bit softer, I will increase that by, let's say, 4 psi or 0.2 bars. And same in the rear as well. Metzeler tires, so a little bit more tire pressure. Another thing that might affect stability of the bike, especially on the fork mounted fairings, street glides, etc., is the shape of the handlebar. Are you still riding stock handlebar or different one, aftermarket, or a Harley with a different design? And here you see the comparison between the stock roadglide handlebar and the tall boy one, and this shape affects the aerodynamics and therefore the stability of the bike. Windshield is of course affecting aerodynamics and therefore aerodynamic stability as well. So if you change your windshield to a taller one, aftermarket one, there might be effects that haven't been considered yet. If everything so far has been checked and is within specs or didn't make any change, then we have to go deeper down the rabbit hole and check the front tire, the front wheel, for misalignment or even some defects in the thread. Therefore, we have to remove the front wheel. You can check for humps in the wheel or the rim when the bike is lifted with a plastic tool, and then just check that there are no humps or any damage to the rim. The same with the tire, but it's easier with a tire or wheel balancing tool, which I will show in a second. There we go. You see with this tire balancing stand, it's very easy to check that the front tire is balanced, which it is, and you can as well easily check the tire for any damage. Might be some very small cracks here in the tire surface that give a hint that the tire is damaged inside, and you can very easily check that there's no hump in the rim or in the tire causing the instability. And as the front tire is now off and accessible, I will of course clean it right away. Back to the topic. So the front wheel is reinstalled, all bolts are torqued and everything is cleaned, especially those Brembo radial calipers. And now we will focus on the rear end, how the rear end might affect unstable wobbling situation. And I don't know if I have mentioned it already, single mode is not a wobbler. So it is just an example of how many factors might be involved in wobble on some Harleys. Now the effect of aftermarket suspensions. So proper aftermarket suspension, regardless of the brand name, should not cause wobbling. They might shift the wobbling speeds to higher speeds, but aftermarket suspension should be bought properly, so I mean the right product, and installed properly. And one thing that you can check easily is the sag. So the front sag on those Harley Touring bikes should be somewhere between 20 and 25 millimeter. And I'm talking about the static sag, so not the rider sag. Rider sag is 10 millimeters more on the Wilbers bikes, mostly. There are some differences, however. And if you have adjustable front suspension, make sure that the static sag is not too big. So on the rear we have a couple of different factors influencing stability. Most important, first of all, is dirt on the rear wheel, and we're going to address that immediately. You see, the rear wheel is clean now, still a little bit wet, so the problem is solved. Next step is to check the alignment of the rear axle with a special tool like this, or with a measuring tape. So what you basically do, you remove the plastic cover of the swing arm axle, and then you take your measurement from the center of the swing arm bolt to the center of the rear axle and compare it with the other side. Both should be equal, otherwise you have to loosen the rear axle nut and align the rear axle. As I mentioned, use the special tool, or if it's not available, just use a regular measuring tape, and then you get the same results. Next thing we want to check is the rear swing arm alignment. So either with a special tool like this or similar. This one is the Equalizer by Rack and Pull Industries. Pretty expensive piece of equipment, around $650, but you can as well use a measuring tape. And so this distance needs to be the same on Kuckuck. Ja, Gottes miteinander. So, und wieder von vorn. Next thing we want to check is the alignment of the rear swing arm. For that, we are taking the measurement between the two shock absorber mounting points, and this one should be the same on the other side, otherwise the rear swing arm is misaligned. Here we go. Yeah, I know that with single mold everything is correct. Sometimes there's a misalignment due to the rubber mounting of the rear swing arm of 3, maybe even more than 3 mil. If we do have a misalignment, we throw down some washers. So if we do have a misalignment and we have wobble, most of the time we have a misalignment, but the bike runs stable, so don't touch it, don't change anything. But if there's misalignment and a wobble, we need to get an adjustable engine mount, and then we will change the position of the engine, the primary, the gearbox and the swing arm by correcting the length of this front engine mount. As everything is rubber mounted, here you see. Another thing to check is the rear swing arm bearing. So for this we have to remove both shocks and then just by feel see if there's any resistance in the swing arm bearing. But this one is very light, and this is affecting the rear suspension and therefore the tendency to wobble as well. Like the front suspension, it's important to set the rear suspension properly in order to have the geometry of the bike in the right specification. And depending on your kind of suspension, check the manual to make sure that everything is set according to your weight. And as all those springs, aftermarket or stock, have some manufacturing tolerances, you cannot just rely on a diagram and look for your weight and dial in the amount of preload. You have to check the rider seg while you are on the bike, irrespective of what kind of suspension you have. For example, I had some issues when adding the Job Tour Pack, as I had a very soft base setup just for me as a single rider. And then by adding the Tour Pack, I didn't correct the base setup. And so at low speeds, around 70 kilometers an hour, which is around 40 miles per hour, idling into a village, I had some severe handlebar fluttering when I took both hands off the handlebar. Well, normally you wouldn't do that, but by correcting the preload and correct the base setting to my new base with the Tour Pack, everything is now fine again. Okay, you see the different causes for wobble on a Harley can be very, very widespread. And if you change, for example, the tire size on your bike without doing any modifications, you will double or triple the chances that something might affect the stability of the bike. Regarding our magic bushings, we realized they do not come without side effects. They increase the stability, the rigidity of the rear swing arm, therefore increasing stability. However, they are transferring a lot of engine vibrations, and on the twin cam I do not recommend them. A friend of mine with a twin cam asked me to remove them almost immediately. On the Milwaukee 8s, it's bearable, and it all depends on what you want. If you want to go on a racetrack with your Harley, then, well, that's the price you have to pay. But then you would have a stiffer suspension as well, and you're definitely selling comfort for getting more stability. As I'm just a relaxed rider, I choose to remove the bushings, just keep the top engine mount to have the rear swing arm aligned properly, and therefore have a comfortable ride. And as I mentioned before, single mode was never a wobbler and is not going to be, and I hardly hit those speeds where the wobble might start, as my preference speed is much lower, around 60 miles an hour, even though we have no speed limit here in Germany. So thank you for watching, and enjoy your Harley just the way you like it, and safe rides. And the shitty car that's just approaching. We got a lot of experience on those parts, so stay tuned. Needs to be the same on Kuckuck. Ja, Gottes Willen.